Good evening, everyone. Of course, all the news last couple of days revolves around Artemis, 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 Artemis. Oh, and didn't I mention Artemis? But besides that, Star Cloud just hit unicorn status with the big fundraise. The HTS market expects us to reach $76 billion. I'll tell you what that means. We're going to look at quickly at the 8 startups investors chased at Y Combinator Demo Day, which includes a moon hotel. A company I've never heard of called Etherflux is raising a Series B at a $2 billion valuation. The numbers just keep shooting up this year. Gwynne Shotwell claims Starlink could peak out at 15 to 20,000 satellites. Russia intends to replace Soyuz by 2028, and ESA member states are calling for cancellation of the Earth Return Orbiter. Is this payback for Gateway? We'll find out. All that and our guest, Dr. Dan Garretson, from the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. My name is Thomas Andrew Olson, and this is The Unknown Quantity. Well, as you know, this program is brought to you by the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. And who are we and what do we do? Well, I've told you before, I'm going to tell you again. We champion and strengthen emerging space startups and space adjacent enterprises worldwide through advisory, access, and advocacy. Our pitch events and world-class boot camps fortify startups to be better investor ready. A lot of our work, especially this podcast, is supported by our listeners and fans like you. So if you just go to cscf.space/support and click the Plain as Day donate button, a little in the tip jar each month makes a big difference. Don't forget to like and subscribe and tell your friends. Speaking of friends, my oldest space friend, Michael Lane, who just finished painting his wheel of Dharma for a change, is here with me. Michael, come on in.
Hey, how's things?
Hey, how's the wheel of Dharma treating you?
Things are good. It's kind of a bright, sunny day out there. It was a nice weekend. Nothing big. A little bit of housework, a little bit of chores. Went outside. Went out to a big garden. That was it. It was chill, pretty chill.
Yeah. I got back from I think Friday afternoon. I got back from the conference. I was just like exhausted for 2 days. I was just like, I wake up in the morning and think, well, it's been a day. I'll be fine. I'll go do stuff in here. I was dead. I was like on half cylinders the day later. I was like, what is going on?
Yep. It's real. It's real.
But now I'm getting it back together and putting a list together. Now I got a list together, a huge list this big of all the people I have to catch up with, and things like that. Interestingly, I am going. I don't know if they're calling it a launch party. It don't seem to be. It's a gathering of people.
Yeah.
Near the Cape.
Yeah.
As mostly as investors and those kinds of people.
Cool.
I guess Megan Crawford helped put this together, and she got me on her list. And so I got to race down there and go do that. It's like an hour and a half drive almost, but there and back. But totally I got to do it. It may not happen. As you know, the launch is scheduled for 6:33 p.m. on April 1st, which is Wednesday, but who knows? So but the party goes on regardless, and those are important people for me to meet.
You want to see and be seen in that environment.
And as Sean is reminding me, we need sponsors. Yeah, you bet. Well, I'll be handing out cards all over the place and talking to people. So I'm looking forward to that a lot.
It's not quite as cool as being able to drive over and watch the damn thing, but we're going over to the Museum of Flight. Rachel and John and I, we're going to go catch the Museum of Flight watch party, which, we've got Blue, we've got SpaceX, we've got Stoke, we've got Star Cloud. So, we've got a thriving ecosystem, and a lot of those folks are going to show up at the Museum of Flight. It'll be the first watch party I've had over there. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be fun. Yeah.
Well, there's a launch party in my yard. I can see the launches from my front yard, but it'll be very different being at the Cape, seeing the rumble and the roar. So I hope it happens. That will be. It's going to be a good to do no matter what. But that would be the great way to cap it off. That would be good.
Yeah.
I was too young for a Saturn launch.
Right. No,
I was across the country. I wasn't. Dad wasn't going to do that. So
diapers.
Here we are.
I was in diapers.
And so speaking of that, there's I picked because there's 100 articles, all over the place about Artemis. Which one do you pick? Pick one. They're all the same, and they're all written by the same people or the same AI. And so you still say, okay, well, here's somebody. Now you have to consider the source. It is the Guardian, and so But they did ask the question: we got this lunar mission, a return visit after 50 plus years. Like, is it going to generate the same excitement as the original did? And a lot of people are saying, this guy is saying, well, don't count it out. I think, there's 2 whole generations that have grown up since the last time.
Right. Yep.
And so it may be that they will actually, and maybe some of them don't even believe we went there the first time. So this is a good chance for them to rethink their life choices while they're watching this. You know what I mean?
Right. I would like that. That would be a great outcome if somebody was questioning that and they oh, maybe the world isn't flat. I mean, maybe, right? I don't know. Not one person that I know that's not like a nerd or that I haven't evangelized to, but just random people. I don't know one person that knows we're flying around the moon next week.
Wow.
This week. What was I saying?
This week. Could be this week.
I don't know one person that knows that's happening that I haven't personally evangelized to. So,
dude, where do you drink, man? And this is like,
well, it's causing me to drink. I know I am. I've been really kind of disappointed by that, which is one of the reasons I'm going to go to the Museum of Flight, because I want to be surrounded by nerds like me. Yeah. I was really disappointed.
Well, I'm going to be lucky. I'm going to be in a room full of people who really are into this stuff and may even want to put their money down. So
great. Yeah, no, it's, I'm Catholic and it's Holy Week. So I've been spending a lot of time with my mom and her friends. Nobody knows this is happening in that older crowd, in that religious crowd. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it's been kind of surprising and a little bit sad. Yeah. So I hope, right? We got this article from the Guardian, and I hope people pay attention. I really do. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll know more. We'll know more on Thursday.
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
Now your buddies at StarCloud,
just
raised another $170 million to accelerate their development of the next generation spacecraft. And apparently that helped them reach a $1.1 billion valuation.
I was able to get a little bit of inside scoop there and learn a little bit about their funding sources. Some stuff you would know. I was a little surprised to see Google Ventures was very prominent in there. A couple months ago, at the end of last year, the folks from Payload made a prediction that it was going to be Amazon and AWS and Azure, Microsoft, where they were going to be the funders. Google is a funder in this round, so they're definitely putting. I couldn't find out how much money was invested from Google, but they were one of the.
And those guys are still on track for 88,000 satellites.
Right.
So
I don't know if I was saying this to Sean, or Sean and I were talking earlier before we started the show today. Is this really a play for them? Like, are they really, really going to do this, or is this an acquisition target and SpaceX should just buy them? Because I wonder if they can pull this off. They're a small company. They're only like 20, 23 people, 27 people.
Okay.
So
right.
yeah, but that really puts a stamp on the Seattle ecosystem.
Sure.
That puts a I think our Seattle ecosystem is very close to half a $500 million so far this year. So that's been wild. Portal made a bunch of money. Integrate invested a bunch of money. Not even counting Stoke with their 800 million in the last 6 months. So yeah. it's supercharging our local ecosystem.
It is.
Yeah.
And you could use it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. So we've got some folks here. Veronica's here. Hi. Dallas.
Hey,
do we know Dallas?
Do we know Dallas?
Yes. You know me? Yeah, we know Dallas. He saw a lot of Apollo and Skylab launches in college. I did too, in high school and college. In fact, I was just finishing college the first time when Apollo Soyuz flew. So,
wow.
Yeah, we're about the same bracket.
All right, what's next?
What's next? Oh, HT. I was going to tell people what HTS means because I forget it too. Yeah. High throughput satellites is what they've got. It's got a name now.
Okay.
And they're showing that, and this latest report from Novaspace shows that global demand is going to reach 218 terabytes per second by 2034, and service revenues are set to more than double to 76 billion over that same period. And it's driven by the rapid expansions of constellations led by Starlink and a steep change in performance pricing and global adaptation. I mean, this alone is becoming a huge market. I remember when all of space wasn't that big. I know. But a lot of it is high growth applications that are driving this. Land mobility, Milsat, comms, and just networks themselves. The service revenues are already up 44% just in the last 5 years.
Is high throughput satellites, is that a name? Like, I've not heard that name before.
I know. I think it's something to do with, so you're saying that in Europe.
Okay.
Because HAPS, the word, what a HAP is, right? Well, HAPS in Europe means high altitude pseudo satellite. Not high altitude platform, plural.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay. So you get that a lot. Here we have new space is one word, but the S is still capitalized. And over there, it's two words.
Yep. Right.
So, little things.
Well, all right. So $76 billion for just this. Yep. As you were just saying a minute ago, it wasn't that long ago where the whole space sector didn't hit that. And now you're saying this one slice of the space sector. That's pretty exciting.
It is. Yeah, I think that's very cool. It just means more communication for everybody, and it's a new growth phase. And so they want to sell you a report, of course, at Novaspace, but I'm not going there.
That's what they
I say what I wanted to say, and the heck with that. Okay. Next up, Y Combinator did a demo day, and there were there's 8 startups out there that investors were chasing a lot. And so you've got one of them is Beyond Reach Labs. They have deployable solar arrays, and they say they're the size of a dining table at launch, but they unfold to the size of a football field when they reach orbit. So it can increase available power tenfold by slashing costs by 88%. That seems vaguely important.
Right.
As I like to say. And they already have a flight plan for 2027. They've already secured 325 million in LOIs from leading space companies. And so, well, LOI is not a purchase order, so we'll see.
Right. You and I have expressed skepticism over the same dollars being handed back and forth in this industry for years. But the bar at Y Combinator is pretty high, so maybe there's some more depth to those LOIs.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, well, because this is just a quick little article. We don't know who those LOIs are with. If I knew who they were with, I could probably tell you. Whether they're for real or not.
You could grade them. Yeah. Sean's got a whole series on how to grade risk, right?
Absolutely.
So,
I'll mention Byteport really quickly, just because as a retired geek, it's really interesting to me. They're building a new ridiculously fast file transfer protocol. Apparently, TCP is too slow for the AI age, and so he built DART, which is short for Dynamic Accelerator Record Transfer, which can apparently transfer large files 10 times faster than TCP and even 1,500 times faster on what he says, quote unquote, reliable connections. There's a security testing tool. Oh, here's one. There's drones. They want to replace cowboys. Have autonomous drones too, but autonomous drones to herd and monitor cattle on massive ranches. So we're getting away from cowboys on horses, motorbikes. Forget about it. We're going to do drones now.
Great. That you could do your roundup from your living room or something.
Yep. But here's the one I wanted to point to: is an outfit called GRU Space, and they say they're building permanent lunar infrastructure, starting with a hotel on the moon. And this is going to be part of what we're going to be talking about with our guests later. So. I don't know these guys, Skylar Chen. I don't know him, but he said he's a recent Berkeley grad who built software at Tesla. Okay, well, he says he has developed a moon factory. Of course he has. That can turn lunar soil into structural bricks.
That's 3D printing with Lunacrete. That's not
new at all.
I'm pretty amazed that got the attention of Y Combinator.
Yeah. Because
people have been asking me to submit to YC for a while, and I'm like, they're not gonna buy my. But now, after so StarCloud came from them, and this is what I was going to prep our guests with. StarCloud used his class president at Harvard, then go to McKinsey credentials to drive a wheelbarrow down the street and people put money into it, but it was Y Combinator that really gave him the cherry on top that says, okay, these guys are real, and that's what allowed them to raise as much money as they did. But honestly, I'm pretty shocked that a moon hotel got through the filters at Y Combinator. And frankly, I think your system and my system is a hell of a lot farther along than a moon hotel. So I got to say, I'm both envious and frustrated at the same time.
You got to hand it to people for their success, but you go, how did this happen again?
How did that happen again?
Yeah. Okay.
So, all right. So we're going to watch GRU Space.
Yes, we are.
See what
see what happens. Now, who's Ether Flux? Do you know anything about these guys?
I don't, except that this is one of the crypto bro dudes that has limitless wealth and decided, what? Let's go to space. So he's in the same camp as the folks from Vast. And Copernic and a few others. They're like, all right, let's use it. And I've been saying for years that the crypto bro dude community should embrace the space tech community because they're now.
Well, that's what it's doing now. It's a space solar power startup. It's raising a Series B, no less. I didn't hear of them at the Series A. They raised a Series B, and it would boost their valuation to $2 billion already. It's going to be laser
And
power
they're going after data centers. They're not focusing on space-based solar power the way they started, and they're thinking about data.
Right, powering data centers in space with solar power as a separate thing, and doing it with laser transmission. And so and they're gonna experiment on it on a satellite bus built by Apex Space, and that's the company's first data center satellite expected next year. And so they want to compete with terrestrial economics. I don't know what that means yet, but I guess we're going to find out next year.
Yep.
So very quickly, Win Shotwell came out and said Starlink might plateau at 15 to 20,000 satellites. That's a long way from the 100,000 he's talking about in his IPO.
They've got 1 million. They've got an application at the FAA and FCC for 1 million.
Yep.
So she's like, well, and we all know who really runs that company, right? So,
right.
If Gwen says it's 20, I'm gonna bank on 20.
Because that's a big difference. And we've talked about the impossible economics of trying to get all those satellites up there and keep them maintained and replace them. It's just
orbit change, right? They're going to have to continually dodge themselves and everything else up there. I think if you put 1 million out, you are literally going to build a fence around the world that when that cascade of failure happens.
And it may be that maybe she's recognizing something he isn't yet, that there is a natural limits to certain things you can do in the world, and maybe just nature itself will not be fooled. And this is what you end up with, and that actually in the end works out better for everybody because there's still room to travel.
I don't think I've ever seen Gwen contradict Elon.
Mm-hmm.
Have you?
No. I'm wondering if your phone is ringing right now.
That is the, I mean, like, okay, 20,000 is not the same as 1 million, but the biggest takeaway for me is I don't think I've ever seen her publicly disagree with her boss.
Yeah, well,
that surprised me.
Yeah. Okay, one more news item. Okay. Okay. I know Sean says one more news item, but if we hurry, we can do two. There's only 2 left. Russia is rolling out a new spacecraft to replace Soyuz in 2028. They just TASS just put out a report on that. It's called the Next Generation Manned Crew Transfer Vehicle, and it said it will perform its first flight into space in 2028. And so, I mean, Soyuz has had a good run. What, 1967? I think it came out.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost 60 years later. It's 60 years later, they finally get a replacement. So they're already doing some original testing and the parachute testing, so they're ready to roll soon.
Very neat.
Yeah, so I'm actually kind of looking forward to seeing that, to see what that's going to look like. Yeah. With all the changes they'll put in there. And so final, let's do it real quick. I just want to throw it out there because the ESA member states are calling for a cancellation of the Earth Return Orbiter, which is a key element of the Mars sample return mission. And that was their contribution.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're looking to cancel it.
Is that retribution for us canceling Gateway? I feel like
I mentioned that in my intro. 20 minutes ago. So it could be. So, okay, if that's
maybe we're reading too much into it, but it. I've lost confidence in the Mars sample return mission. I really think what's going to happen is China's going to walk around, kick up some dust, pick the thing up, walk it back to their return vehicle, and that's how we're getting the Mars sample returns back. So I have utterly lost faith in NASA's side of that equation. So it doesn't entirely surprise me that Europe is saying, well, if America's not going to do their side of that Mars mission, why do we need to do our side of that mission?
So, and Dallas is saying that's because we canceled the Mars sample return mission.
I know. That's my point.
Okay. Yeah, where do you
Yeah.
want to start the list? Yes, I
Yeah.
know. Okay, well, here's the thing. I want to go back to that startup that wants to build a hotel on the moon because our topic tonight is, in fact, um, building our cislunar economic infrastructure and how we're going to get from here to there. And of course, the question's been raised this last time we talked, which was is NASA's initial investment of 20 billion in a potential moon base near the South Pole, will that be sufficient to kickstart everything and get all the private sector activity going and start a really booming cislunar economy? And how do we make that transition from missions to markets? And to that end, our guest tonight is a consultant and a space economy strategy advisor, Dr. Dan Garretson. He helps investors and operators navigate the frontier economy where space systems, mobility, defense technology, and next-gen digital infrastructure converge. His work centers on commercial clarity in emerging markets, understanding where the real demand is forming, where value accrues, and how operators and investors position themselves as missions give way to markets. He has over 25 years of strategy, merger and acquisition, digital transformation, space, mobility, transportation, tech, defense. He's like done it all. He's a national level policy work, CSO level strategy for high growth companies, and hands-on experience himself launching a logistics tech startup. Dr. Dan Garretson, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks. That's quite the intro.
Well, for your words, I modified them just a little bit. You know.
Fair enough. So
okay. Thanks for being here. You're one of the most interesting guys I've never heard of, and now here I am hearing of you. I'm having a great time already, and we just got started. For the rest of our viewers who are probably even more clueless than I am, I'd like you just very briefly, take a minute or so, and give us kind of your origin story. Is this something you wanted to do as a child? I mean, how did you end up being exactly where you are now, doing the things you do? What motivated you? What got you excited?
I ask myself that every day, actually, but fair enough. No, I always been fascinated by space science and so forth. I got my PhD in astrophysics. So really intended actually to go down the astronaut path, and got a little derailed by some of what I saw there. And I also, in the academic environment, wasn't overly excited about continuing down the academic path. So as I was finishing up my PhD, decided to go into the business world, and actually went to McKinsey & Company initially. So I guess that's the Harvard McKinsey connection you're talking about.
Michael? Yep, exactly. Right.
So the same way. A lot of us started as frustrated astronauts and ended up doing something else.
Yep. I feel like I probably had a better shot than I gave myself credit for at the time, but it seemed like it was a long shot to invest all that time in. And then of course Challenger happened and all that fun stuff along the way. Yeah. At ultimately Columbia.
It's a different world now. There are folks going to space, civilians not ever related to NASA at all are starting to go to space. So hang out a little bit longer. I think if you have some patience, I think people are going to fly that would have given up on that dream. So
well, I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
So I got enough years ahead of me that hopefully
right.
I don't get laid low by unexpected consequences.
Right.
But yeah, so I was at McKinsey, felt the siren call of the web, as so many did during the early days there. Ended up at Forrester Research, and that's where I covered a lot of mobility technology and so forth. But early 2000s, due to sort of some prior relationships and so forth, I had the opportunity to join Science and Technology Policy Institute. And I was part of the team that founded that under the Institute for Defense Analysis, and I had responsibility for space in particular, among other things. Right around the time that
what years was that? Yeah,
2004 was when we launched that.
Okay.
So I worked with them through probably 2010, 11 timeframe. Initially as a full-time staff member, I did a little bit with a corporate executive board at the Research and Technology Executive Council, but then did some more adjunct work with them, space launch and so forth. but very focused on, I guess technically I covered the space, aeronautics, physical sciences portfolio. So I had responsibility for space, but also did some stuff on P&T technology, on computational fluid dynamics, things of that sort. But the big thing was really as Elon was getting going with SpaceX. I guess it was a couple years into it at that point. But the immediate question I got asked when I took over that portfolio was, all right, why is space launch so expensive, and what's this guy Elon doing that's going to make it different?
Well, I guess now we know.
There were good. Whoops, sorry. There we go. There were some, interesting indicators. We went around, my team and I talked to the primes, obviously, and a lot of the folks in the industry, heard all the reasons why he was going to fail and never going to make it, and all the rest. Talked to him directly about some of what he was thinking, and I would say it was very clear. It was very different. That was it was pretty stark at that point. Didn't mean he was going to succeed, but there were things that I characterize it as bringing a Silicon Valley mindset to it. The whole kind of learn fast, fail quickly. That was what I think was probably an underappreciated aspect of a lot of the early stuff, was that learning curve and how the importance of getting cadence up, repeatability, things like that. I don't mean to speak overly disparagingly of it, but we had 2 launch vehicles with the Atlas V and the Delta IV at the time, and there was this sort of almost emotional attachment to having multiple vehicles.
Yeah.
And we tried to make the point that, well, what you're doing is you're splitting a very small launch frequency across 2 vehicles, and you're reducing your ability to learn that much further. So I think that's really what Elon brought. Now, of course, it still took him 15 ish years to really get that cadence up to the point where they were doing, but they did a lot of interesting things along the way. The 9 engines on the Falcon 9, a lot of learning quickly on the engines and so forth. So there's a lot of interesting aspects that I think that he brought to launch. So we discovered that first of all, and then there was they were starting to think about NASA COTS, and they were like, okay, is this really viable? Do we think there's really a potential case here? And so, again, talked to a lot of the entrepreneurial players as well in that particular case. Gave our assessment, and we weren't convinced the market that Elon saw was there, but we were convinced he was doing something very different and dramatically, I guess, interesting in how he approached it.
How did the report reviewers and readers react to that? Because that was still early enough that there were a lot of detractors and naysayers in my circles. How did they react to those reports?
So we, I was kind of the backroom guy giving the input to the sponsor there. I mean, there was a lot of receptivity to the analysis. I mean, I will say, I was pretty direct in my opinion at the time, and it was just kind of input into it, was that we really should downsize the EELV program and just choose one because of that learning curve sort of thing. So it was that kind of input where I was giving that input, and they liked it. They appreciated things that I said about Elon and so forth, but it was factored into a much larger set of activities. But we did end up with the COTS program. I mean, that was, I wouldn't say my analysis was dispositive on that by any means. Mm-hmm. That was, I think, a train that was moving already anyway, and we were just providing some of the ammunition that, or I should fuel that kept it going, I guess.
Right.
But it was, the question really was, is there a viable provider? And we pointed out the different ways, the access to capital that Elon had, the approach they were taking, some of the learning curve aspects, things of that sort. I would say it's very well received.
Stuff that we take for granted now, but was borderline heretical back then. I'm gonna put Dallas's comment up on the screen here for a second. He was out talking to the Marshall Space Flight Center. A director there once told me that 8 engines on the launch vehicle was too many. Right? Like,
I heard that too, actually.
Right. Yeah. So really went against conventional wisdom during those days.
Right. It was a lot of complexity. Yep. A lot of things to coordinate and so forth, and you wanted to make it simpler. Was the thinking, at least. There's, I mean, I'm not. But like I say, what I think it really helped with was that learning curve aspect, and just the fact that they were getting so much insight along the way and willing to fail. I mean, that was the thing that we heard from some of the contractors. Like, Elon can put an engine on a stand and blow up the stand, and everybody thinks he's great because he learned something. If we did that with, the
there's programs getting cut, there's heads that are rolling. Yeah, very different standard.
Exactly.
Very different standard. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's actually part of the insight I took away from it was, there's importance to the commercial discipline that supposedly things like the COTS program were bringing, but you really had to have a supplier that was willing to stand their ground and say, this is the way we're doing it. We see a market here. We're building for that market. And yes, we'd like to sell to you. They had to sell to them to get the funding and so forth. But at the same time, they had the longer, the North Star, if you will, of this is the market we're going for. And, we're only going to take so much compromises in terms of making it very mission specific. Meaning, following along with the commercial, I guess, oversight of the powers that be.
Well, SpaceX wasn't the only winner from the COTS race there. I mean, Orbital Sciences did too, and they did very well. They got acquired by ATK, which in turn got acquired by Northrop Grumman and became Northrop Innovations. They're doing very well. So that was another winner from the COTS period.
Yep. Although they don't have the same, kind of cadence with a launch vehicle that was successful in the same way. No. So, and this, I think you see this as well in the Commercial Crew Program is, there's a certain element of the commercial discipline of or commercial labeling of the contracts and how you do it, firm fixed price and all the rest. It's not always the same in terms of behavior. I've kind of written about this as well, is that, commercial label doesn't necessarily mean you've got discipline by the supplier saying, hey, we're building towards the market, and also discipline by the contractor that's saying we will accept what they're bringing versus like, oh no, we want this little tweak or this little thing because this is the way we think it should go.
Yep. And on that, let's go to the moon. I want to talk about what you're doing now and what you're thinking now. You write a lot of stuff, and I've read some of it. I'm going to read a lot more before it's over. Like we said today, there's another group that's coming out of Y Combinator. They want to build a hotel on the moon. Just this last Thursday, we had a long conversation with Dr. Doug Plata about putting gigantic inflatable habitats on Mars that could hold 1,000 people in a pop with room to spare. And so they're getting ready. They're ramping up to do these kinds of things. And what is the pathway? How do we get from, as you put it, missions to markets?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. Obviously you're going to want there to be a problem that you're solving, or at least a need that you're addressing ultimately. And that's still, the jury's still out on that a lot. But we have a lot of people, high net worth individuals that are kind of interested in the space tourism thing. The folks wanting helium-3 or whatever. So there's indicators, but we're not there yet. But the thing that I see is, there's a lot of things going on by governments around the world that are politically driven. So you're going to see a ton of investment, obviously, because of the moon race, because of, this view of infrastructure. I'm not going to weigh in on whether we really should be doing it. The thing that I take away from that is we are going to do it. There's a lot of investment happening. And whether it's just the US alone, you obviously got China going, you've got the Middle East, you got Europe and so forth. So they're investing the money. The thing that I try to think about is like, okay, if we're doing this anyway, how do we do this in a way that we don't we end up with real markets at the end? And that's the way I think, yes, you can get a lot of money going in just by governments spending the money. But at the end of the day, you want markets where you're addressing needs, people are willing to spend the money and see value from the activities. And you get there by having products that are standardized, where you're driving down costs because of these learning curve activities, where you're really sort of making it repeatable. You have a larger customer base in mind and so forth. Without that, you end up building for a mission, the NASA hope that we've got the mission to get to the moon. It becomes very bespoke and so forth. And so my concern is if you end up with government as usual, even under the commercial label, and I would say you saw this to some extent with Starliner, they still behave in very mission-oriented fashion, very responsive to, the government command, or the government wanting to weigh in on it. And so you have to have commercial discipline on both sides to make sure we don't end up with a ton more space junk in space, I guess hundreds of tons, millions of tons, whatever, of space junk, rather than kind of a repeatable, scalable platform that people can start to, you're driving down costs, you're actually delivering things like, people want to go to the moon and and stay in that space hotel, that lunar hotel. Hopefully we can deal with property rights at some point. So we got to figure that one out. Or people, can go up there and extract, the helium-3 for quantum computing or whatever the case may be, and hopefully we'll find other markets. But the only way that this really becomes a sustainable economy long-term is that kind of, standardization, repeatability that really has that flywheel on driving down costs. So that's kind of where, sorry, I keep being non-centered here for some reason. But, and that's kind of my view on this is like, if we're going to do this anyway, let's do it in a way that really creates a sustainable flywheel than just something that delivers on the mission.
What would that look like? So I had a conversation with a gal today that has a pretty remarkable architecture for a lunar habitat. Tom, it was different than the one we looked at for Plata the other day, but her focus is that speed is a design constraint. If it's not TRL 5, we're not putting it into our plan, which is kind of how we operate, right? So what would you say if you had a spare $1 billion? What would you build up there if you were able to design the market? How would you build it?
So great question. I mean, so there's the personal thing. I'd love to go and stay in the Moon Hotel, or try out the commercial LEO destination and try that out. So there's that. But if you're talking about from a market perspective, I think there's a few things where we're seeing real signals of commercial activity that we can start to build on. Obviously, most of it's still focused on LEO. I mean, there's not, I love going to the moon and so forth, but the commercial activity, you've got Starlink obviously is the big one. You've got some signs with Earth observing and some of that the capabilities there. We'll see what happens with space-based data centers. The economics are, a pretty hard hill to climb there, shall we say? But at the same time, there's real constraints on Earth that are providing a real forcing mechanism. So there may be a real value proposition. We're solving a real problem with space-based data centers, maybe. I think the jury's still out on that, but that's at least something where you can see a real commercial, and you've got so much money flowing into AI that there may be something realistic there. So I think you see some of those evidence of those markets forming, and we'll see about human stuff. I do think there's some interesting things there, and I actually wrote something a little bit about Axiom and what they're doing in terms of saying we don't know what the market is going to be ultimately, but we do know there's a lot of sovereigns around the world that there's a prestige issue, there's an issue of trying to be in the space activity. So let's try to cobble together a market out of that. I think it's a very instructive and interesting strategy. Still the jury, it's still early. But if you can start to do that, if you can make that a repeatable kind of offering, if you can get the scale there and so forth, maybe it's maybe somebody who's got a few less billions than Isaacman or whatever, who'll take the next ride and so forth. And you get to the hundreds of millionaires and so forth on down the pipe, and scale it up.
Well, so far the Axiom model has only proven true one time that I'm aware of, right? They only have one sovereign nation client. That plan killed Gravitics, and it killed Bigelow. Both of whom tried that same model, and both of them had a real struggle.
Well, you've had a couple different sovereigns that have flown on. They've had 5 missions, 4 or 5. With several, I know Turkey, Spain. I can't rattle off the list, but there's a few, and even some sort of privately funded folks as well. So there's been several cases, but you're right. I think in any case, it is a really hard proposition to make on human access to orbit, just because it's so expensive and you've got such a small market segment. But if there's any sort of thing that can make it work, I think that's at least one place. Or we have a crypto billionaire investing in Vast, for example. So that's the other option.
Yeah.
And Aether Flux, we learned that one today.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that gave me, and we actually talked about this when I was doing the early COTS work and so forth, was there is the trend, of more and more high net worth individuals. You had the dot-com boom sort of drove so much of that, of course, and then you've had some of the things happening since. Didn't see crypto at that point, but when it came, you've now had a lot of these folks that have a lot of that orientation and sort of really interested in investing in it. So there's a lot of money to play with, sometimes not spent so smartly, but they're investing in it and creating the capability. And again, if they can do it in a way that really creates that flywheel, that's how do we standardize this? And Elon brings the mindset of the best part is no part, things of that sort, to really simplify, standardize, drive repeatability, and so forth. Get the reusability as well, to really push this forward. That's the mindset that needs to exist to make this a scalable platform. You don't want the Ferrari, you want the Ford going up there repeatedly. So
okay.
Nice.
Now the thing is, we've already heard we're excuse me, NASA's now going to commit $20 billion to our lunar station.
Yep.
Is that going to be sufficient to create some kind of environment where more private sector activity will pour in as a result? Kind of an alpha town concept where they'll build this publicly funded station, but then a whole bunch of commercial efforts are going to grow up around it, and next thing you have this a gold mining town in South Dakota.
And that would assume the market is there. And I would say
right.
There's still a lot of things. I think what we have is a situation where there's a market, if you will, of sovereigns that feel like they have to get there. It's right now it's China and the US primarily, but everybody else is trying to figure out how to get involved in the land rush as well, so to speak.
Okay.
That's the best proxy for a market that we have so far.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reality is, is it going to be enough? There's a lot about, is the market there ultimately, but there's also a lot about how we do it. And this comes back to, I think, that missions to markets mindset that I like to talk about is, are the contracting organizations, the procurement organizations, going to treat this as a way where, we're serving as anchor demand. We are not the demand, so we're not going to shape every aspect of how you do it, but we're the anchor demand to drive it, and give the contractors the freedom to then, do that analysis, drive the repeatability, drive the standardization that turns this in, that starts to drive down the cost as much as possible. I guess the whole idea of sort of, can you sort of build the sort of standardized capabilities that everybody needs to make this work and drive down those costs. I guess the shovels for the gold rush.
Yeah.
But can you do that? And I think the 20 billion can be a great anchor point for that demand, as long as there is somehow that sort of broader market that can come in at the right cost level. I'm encouraged by the fact that we've driven launch costs down so far, and obviously with Starship, hopefully that gets even farther. So that starts to solve a major gating function. But you still have to get the cost low enough, and are we anywhere close to that to really bring in the folks who want to pay for it? The concern I have also, though, is NASA is going to be NASA. Defense, Department of War is going to be Department of War. They're going to be like, well, maybe you need to just do it this way for us. It's like, is that going to cut off that repeatability? Are they really going to have the discipline needed to really make sure that this becomes, that they can't be hands off, obviously, but at the same time.
But the avalanche of requirements can kill even the best idea, the best program.
And the avalanche of requirements can also sort of constrain the experimentation that needs to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's the government picking winners before the market identifies the more efficient paths.
Exactly. And again, I come back to, just because I saw so much of it up close, what SpaceX was doing with that repeatability. I remember vividly the notion. I went to their factory, and they were building the cones for the engines, the Merlins, I think it was. They had the interior shell etched, put the outer shell out on it, and so forth, and then sort of went down the street to the Pratt & Whitney's facilities, and they were handling the tube around the cone. It's like, okay, one's going to be a much faster, higher throughput rate, and you're going to learn a lot faster. And then throw it on the stand, and it blows up the stand. Oh well, you do it again, and you learn. It's that experimentation and learning that's critical in this.
Yeah.
And you can't do that when you're fully constrained by the contracting organization.
Right. I was gonna also, that kind of brings up a question that Dallas Beanhawk brought up, which is NASA's announcement about changes to the CLD support. Now, we shared an article about that just this last Thursday, where some commercial groups are saying, we don't need a bunch of changes that we can't count on. We like to work with the system that we've been working with and developing under for the last several years. And but then you have somebody like Vast that says, we don't care. We're building our thing anyway, and we're going to launch our thing anyway, and we don't need NASA's approval to launch our thing because this is the first test model for what we want to do. So it doesn't matter. We got the money. We're going to do it anyway. So where do you go with something like that?
Well, what I like about that is, I would say that was Elon's attitude. He was going to do it anyway with SpaceX, and now the reality is, of course, we probably wouldn't have made it without the COTS money, as we all know.
No, not at all. Wouldn't have happened.
So but what I think what he did up front was he showed the commitment. He showed that he could bring the capital together. He showed that he could leverage those market inputs, and the COTS program provided that lubrication he needed. So but at the same time, like I say, there's no way he would have made it without that COTS program. If that's the way it could happen in CLDs, and maybe Vast is that, where he's able to leverage that money to really get him over the hump, but ultimately drive that, I'm going to do this anyway, I'm going to make it happen, I'm going to drive down the cost and make this a repeatable service that I can deliver, then I think there could be a path forward. I don't know that that's proven yet, but and it certainly wasn't proven when Elon got started, but that commitment is going to be huge in terms of making the difference as to whether it actually works in the end.
Yeah.
At least in what I've seen.
Okay.
So, yeah.
How would you, if you would make some changes to whether it's the lunar version of COTS or anything else, what policy choice would you make to incentivize that it goes this way instead of that way? What one thing would you do that would move the needle for the markets versus missions plan?
So there's a couple elements. I mean, I've talked about the commercial discipline. I think that's key. I have to admit, there's a part of they're using a lot of the right words and language, I think, in the Ignition announcement that about buying commercially, firm fixed price, all the rest and so forth. And then you've got and we're also going to have SMEs on site with all these guys, and they're going to help them troubleshoot and so forth. It's like, oh, wait a minute.
Right.
If
they're walking around with the NASA clipboard saying that's not how we do it, it's kind of defeating the whole point. That was exactly what I was wondering about. Like, I like the idea of having a subject matter expert hanging out nearby that I can phone a friend when I have a problem. But I don't necessarily want them walking around the factory floor with a clipboard saying that's not how we do it, right? The point of this is to not do it how you do it.
Right.
Throw away the clipboards.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I have to admit that part of it gave me some pause in thinking about it. And the question is understanding, kind of where are the markets and how do we cobble it together? Like, I think of nuclear power as an element here, and we know that we need some sort of power source on the moon. It's not going to be, you've got half the time you're in darkness anyway, so you got to have something to back it up. Right. Nuclear is the obvious way to do that. But you've got different threads of demand for that. You've got, the mining operations, you've got the military kind of activity or whatever and so forth. How do you cobble that together into something that really creates a signal, even if it is government signal initially, and then use that as kind of something that says, okay, we've got the demand, we can sort of guarantee that we're going to be buying this power, and then, do you actually have the suppliers that they're going to do this anyway? They're going to be, they're gung ho. They know they have a really solid plan and so forth. They can pull the capital together because they know there's going to be some buyer at the end. And by the way, that buyer is all about de-risking the investment. So it's like, making it so that the investors can say, okay, I don't know if you've got a real market here, but at least I know there is going to be some buyer here, that counts for market. That does a stand in for the market.
Right.
So again, doing that in a way that really gets as clear as possible and strong as possible on the commitment and what that demand is going to be and how it's going to shape things, without then turning that into a clipboard and this is how you do it kind of approach.
Well, the good news about all this is that compared to previous decades, previous generations, whether it's Apollo, post-Apollo, or even the shuttle era, we seem now to be in a system, including government policy, which actually encourages private sector involvement more than we had before.
Right.
Apollo was all government because we'd never done it before. I get it. The shuttle, they went the wrong direction at first. They said, well, since we built the shuttle for all this money, we want you to use us exclusively to launch your satellites. And the satellite launch market for a couple of years there just died. And it took them years to retool after the Challenger blew up. And they said, well, we're not making that mistake again. But it set us back a generation when you think about it.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And so we're in a completely different era now where at least, it's agreed across presidential administrations. Even the private sector has a role to play, and that's helpful because when you're building out that kind of infrastructure on the moon and beyond, you got to have plans, especially in the commercial sector, that outlast presidential administration.
Right.
Because there's going to be a new one in 4 years or 8 years. There's going to be a new one, and we need policies then that can kind of travel well, and so these things don't get lost in the shuffle, because we've done that too many times, and it wasn't all that long ago.
Yeah,
they would start changing our mind about these things.
Yeah,
and it is all the incentives in government, or for them to say, put their fingerprints or
have the checkbook, have the clipboard.
Yep. And you're right. If you keep that going too much, whenever the administration changes and the mission changes, you get jerked around.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we're getting close to the end here, so I want to. We got 3 minutes, so I want you to put on your turban and grab your crystal ball and tell us what you think this world of ours is going to look like 5 years from now and 25 years from now.
Sounds good. The way I think about it a little bit, I was, over the last 20, 25 years, it's been a lot about building that first step on the staircase, getting the launch cost down and so forth. And now, going forward, it's a lot more about how do we build that infrastructure to actually operate. And I think the moon is interesting, but is that really going to be the infrastructure? It's a lot more about, what we're doing in terms of the communication infrastructure, the Earth observing, a lot of the things where there really is sort of nearer term commercial use cases. So I think you're going to see over the next, 5 years in particular, that element of we're going to have more than one launch provider at some point. I'm a strong enough believer in markets that somebody's going to come along and be a competitor. Blue Origin's obviously out ahead. Actually, Rocket Lab probably, but although smaller vehicle, all the rest. But somebody's going to start to break this code. And the great thing about SpaceX having done it is there's a bit of a roadmap. So we're gonna see somebody sort of learn from that, and you see that a lot from the SpaceX escapees building up their own capabilities. So I think we're going to see a lot more development, and you're going to see more commercial use cases, whether that's the orbital data centers or a much stronger, I think probably Earth observing is going to, we're going to see a growth in that commercial model. So a lot more commercial activity there. Different aspects around how to think about the on-orbit servicing and repeatability of satellites and things of that sort. Some of the different schemes out there are interesting, but we're going to see more of that ability to be able to service them, and I think build up that infrastructure. So that's kind of on the 5-year time frame.
No big changes there in the first 5 years. We're going to get what we're getting, basically.
At some level, I think we're going to see, because the SpaceX is ramping things up so much, there's we're getting real clarity on who actually would want to buy these launches, and you can start to have that business case become a more manageable business case. So you're going to see that infrastructure building out. So that in the 2025 year time frame, you've got a real infrastructure in place. I'm not sure I would. I think we'll probably be back to the moon, but it's going to be a small number for the next, probably at least the 10-year time frame and much longer. by 25 years, that might start to be a much more significant presence. You know, people really operating. We're going to have more of that capability on the moon. We might see some missions to Mars by that point. I'm hopeful. You know, we can see you've got the sufficient number of billionaires that are really motivated to get to Mars. We know of at least one. Then you might see that. But realistically, we're not going to have, you know, the ongoing set of operations like there really is a chance for on the moon. And that's kind of what I look to see is like, can we see that? Can we see even some of the first space hotels? I think that's a real possibility in that time frame where you know, you'll start to see probably more money than I have at the moment, but folks who are willing to spend on that you know, probably more than a weekend, weeks at the lunar hotel. Things like that. I have a friend who is sort of noting the idea of sort of dune buggy races, you know, X Prize races or whatever, on the moon or something like that. So, you know, we'll probably start to see that. And actually, that's probably an underappreciated aspect is some of the sponsorships and things that people can get in terms of, you know, really driving some of those activities, whether you see some sort of you know, a games in low Earth orbit or ultimately on the moon kind of thing as a significant driver of some of this sort of awareness and interest in the sector.
Okay. Cool. Dr. Dan Garretson, thank you so much for being on the show. You've been a wealth of information, and it's great to get to know you a little bit, and I hope you'll come on again sometime soon.
I would love to. I look forward to it. Great meeting you guys as well, and look forward to further conversations.
It's been wonderful having you. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Okay, on Thursday, another one of our favorites, Dr. Ajay Kothari, is back with us, and that's always a fun conversation. He figured out how to do an entire exploration of the moon program, all without Artemis at all. And so he'll probably talk more on his adventures with that and a lot of other great things. The guy is just a wealth of information, just like our guest was tonight. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. And so on that note, for Michael Lane and Sean Key, and from the Center of Space Commerce and Finance News Desk, I remain Thomas Andrew Olson. Keep watching the skies.